Today, we in the West struggle to tell the stories of the former Soviet peoples outside of Russia. Trust me, Russia wants it that way. In 1917, the Russian Revolution triggered a civil war that ravaged not just Russia, but a lot of the people in these former Soviet countries. In Ukraine, one man with his band of rebels fought the forces of the Tsar and the communist Bolsheviks alike. And what was the cause that they fought for? Well, freedom. Anarchist communist freedom. However, what happens to such a cause when in order to fight it, you must give up a little of the very thing you fought for? This is the story of Nestor Makhno and the Ukrainian Black Army. Nestor Makhno was not a former prince, nor a lifelong philosopher. He was born between 1888 and 89 to a poor peasant family in what is today the Ukraine. Ukraine today borders Russia, but in this period, it was part of a larger Russian empire. That said, Ukrainians have a distinct culture and language. At barely a year old, Nestor's father died, and he and his 7 siblings lived lives working farm labor for the other peasants. He eventually found himself as a worker in a foundry when at the age of 17, Makhno joined an anarchist group called Gulie Polye. 1 year later, he became the leader of an anarchist Robin Hood-like group and gained a lot of local notoriety. Back then, anarchists weren't exactly the peace-loving folk they are today, and quickly, Nestor found himself on trial for participating in a terrorist attack that killed a police officer. He was sentenced to death by the noose, but because he was so young, they commuted him to an indefinite prison sentence in Moscow. Nestor was an awful prisoner. He often bristled against the discipline of prison life. Often he'd be placed in irons or put in solitary confinement. His anarchist ideology grew under the mentorship of an older prisoner named Peter Archinov. He taught Makhno about the work of prominent anarchist philosophers like Mikhail Bakunin and Peter Kropotkin. His mind grew and his anger swelled until he ran right smack into the tides of history. In March of 1917, massive protests, street battles with police, and mutinous soldiers challenged the legitimacy of the rule of the Russian Tsar Nicholas II. Reluctantly, to prevent a complete collapse of the country, Nicholas abdicated the throne to his brother Mikhail, who declined it, suddenly ending centuries of rule by the Romanov dynasty over Russia rather abruptly. A hastily organized provisional government came to power and tried to make major reforms to keep Russia together. They brought about elections and got rid of legal oppression based on religion, family, or nationality. They allowed freedom of speech and protest for the first time, and importantly for this story, gave amnesty to all political prisoners and exiles. Makhno was free, and just in time for the provisional government to fall, and the real beginning of what we know as the Russian Revolution. In Ukraine, anarchist activity was enjoying a new life. Nestor Makhno, the legend himself, returned to Ukraine and became commander of an anarchist army referred to as the Revolutionary Insurrectionary Army of the Ukraine. Often we refer to this group as the Ukrainian Black Army, but many referred to them as the Makhnoshchina. The army ran a guerrilla campaign against monarchist forces, also known as White Russians. He's credited for pioneering ramshackle technologies in this fight, such as the Techanka, which is a horse-drawn platform for mounting a machine gun. Often, historians refer to these Makhnovists as bandits, or sometimes even associate them with a local right-wing kulak movement. I think it might be prudent to point out that stories in this period are contradictory, and without any actors lacking a vested interest in placing verdict on Makhno. Here's where we find one of the first big historical controversies about this Black Army. Around the same time, the chaos of the revolution resulted in a number of anti-Jewish pogroms, a Russian word for random acts of violence often used to refer to attacks on Jewish communities. To this day, several authors claim that Makhno organized massacres of Jewish Ukrainians. This is a tough claim to verify. Ukraine was a pretty chaotic place in this period, and there's a vested interest by someone to make a connection between Ukrainian independence and anti-Semitism. Many Soviet historians after these attacks also seem unable to find this link. However, this doesn't completely clear Makhno. There's just a lot of uncertainty, and we should be aware that for all his philosophies on egalitarianism and liberty, Makhno was a pretty violent person. So back to the fighting. Nestor began with a group of 5 men. They stormed the house of a wealthy Russian family, killed the residents, and stole rifles, horses, and police uniforms. Using these uniforms, they snuck into a ball for the local aristocratic gentry and killed the participants. With local support, and the stolen horses, they bounced around Ukraine performing similar attacks on areas loyal to the Tsar. The Tsarist responded by raising an army made up of retired Tsarist generals, armies from the Caucasus, and strange semi-military organizations called Cossacks, backed up with material support from allies in Great Britain, the United States, Japan, France, and China. The resistance Makhno led used creative, asymmetric warfare. The Ukrainians called Nestor the nickname of Batko, or Little Father, as he was 5'4". Elsewhere in Russia, idealists began to write glowingly of Makhno, and offered him their services. At one point, Nestor's army numbered from 30 to 50,000. By 1920, the Black Army was in the crosshairs of the Bolsheviks in Moscow. The Communist Red Army, led by Leon Trotsky, ordered assassinations of thousands of Ukrainian villagers who had been loyal to the Makhnovists. He even withdrew from fighting the Tsarists in the region to increase the pressure on Nestor's troops. When the Makhnovists ran into a number of military victories, Trotsky offered a deal to work with them against the Tsarists. Nestor agreed on the condition that any anarchist prisoners Trotsky was holding would be freed. They were invited to a conference on the 25th or 26th of November, and all of Makhno's commanders were arrested and subjected to a firing squad. A Red Wedding-esque level of betrayal. Oh shit, spoilers. Yuck. Okay, I need a small intermission here with some cats or something, as this story is really dark. You wonder why I don't talk much about war much on Step Back, and it's because of things like this. I mean, we got the story, but what do we learn from this bloodshed? All I can think that the lesson is that we avoid this again if at all possible. War is bad, kids. You heard it here first. Nestor managed to escape from the conference. The Bolsheviks had depressed the grassroots support Makhno relied on to function. The Ukrainians were tired of war, and no one wanted to help him pick up the pieces of his movement. The Black Army was over. In August of 1921, Nestor escaped Ukraine, sneaking across the border into Romania. He eventually lived out the rest of his life in Paris as a poor taxi driver. This is where Nestor Makhno's story really ends. He didn't rally for another attack, and he died rather young at age 45 from tuberculosis. Makhno's story is a very interesting one to historians. For a long time, Western historians saw the Russian Revolution as a predetermined march towards Stalinism and totalitarianism. Nestor's story shows that there was much more up for grabs, and that there was a powerful libertarian, not that kind of libertarian, alternative to Lenin. Others argue quite the opposite. Many Soviet historians point to the Makhnovists' abandonment of their ideals as a case against anarchist politics. Like many in the West, they see anarchism as unsustainable. And who knows what to think? The story of Nestor Makhno is harrowing, and romantic, and dark, and violent, and always surprising. Like so many revolutionaries before and after him, Makhno said wonderful things while committing atrocities. It's almost as if any movement born in violence rules in violence, even if the goal is, as Nestor said, universal human harmony. Thanks for watching, guys. If this is your first time here, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon to make sure you don't miss the next video. I also appeared in a video Mr. Beat did at VidCon. We asked some questions about history to attendees, and overall had a pretty good time. I want to thank everyone I met at VidCon. I had a great time, met a lot of awesome people, and got a lot of really useful advice. I look forward to going again next year. Before we go, I'd like to give a heartfelt thanks to these patrons as well as Don and Carrie Johnson for their support. I'd like to also highlight this comment on the video about the Raelians from the Zorkiel about swastikas. I certainly think the Zorkiel is onto something here, and talking about the long and strange history of the swastika would be a great, if guaranteed to be demonetized video. Maybe I'll make it an unlockable stretch goal on Patreon. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next Step Back.